We had a few different spots we wanted to get to on the island today, and so we rented this. And I would say it was the most enjoyable thing I've ever done, but it did the job. So we start with some sad news.
What's the sad news?
This is our last day and our last vlog from Greece and Santorini.
Yep.
And in fact, the group has abandoned us. We're all alone. We're the only ones here. Well, I mean, there are other people here, but not the group. Because I don't know if those who are following along closely, we have a wedding this coming weekend, and we need to start making our travels back. The group has headed off, and we're just going to touch on this because it pains me a little bit, but I also feel greedy at the same time. They have headed on to a few smaller islands, Sikanos and Foligrandos. Okay, what she said. Way less touristy, very small, very quiet. They're actually going to have dinner at somebody's mother's house that they know through some connection of David's. It sounds like an amazing experience. Very jealous that we don't get to travel along with them, but we do get to spend this last day here in Santorini, so life isn't too rough.
Nope. So we are back at the Bay of Amodi, and we're gonna go back to that awesome swimming hole. But first we're gonna leave you with some footage that we shot here in Oia that didn't make it to...
Well, that day was packed.
The last vlog.
Yep. The swimming was mid-afternoon, and we've got stuff to roll after that. And we got some other things to share with you today as well. We're in the town of Oia on the island of Santorini. That was the first take. And we are shooting a sunset, but there's a couple things I want to point out. First off is we're not alone, as you can see by people walking behind us, and all of those people up there. But look, where'd the dog go? Where's the dog? Can we see the dog? Oh, there's the dog. Dog's got prime sunset view and spot. He doesn't care, he's not moving. Let's check out the people that have decided to join us up here on this little ledge. We were the first, well, not me, but we've now quite crowded. And Christina, what are you thinking about as you shoot this scene here in front of us?
I mean, I don't think that you could have better light conditions. So the pictures are pretty much shooting themselves at this point.
Sounds good.
I'm using an 85. Maybe I'll pop my 50 on, maybe, but the 85 works well. So it's kind of hard to get a really clear view of the whole ledge because there's kind of a wall in between us and the view, but
right. But it frames it nicely. I mean, without, yeah, right. Let's show folks what we're looking at.
Not too shabby.
Super simple tip for you. The best time to take a portrait picture is immediately after a landscape picture. Right back here, I shot a landscape of these boats in the harbor and the cliff above it. And then I didn't really like, I was kind of cutting off some of the boats, and I realized I was cutting off some of the cliff. So I turned it to a portrait orientation and got a shot that nicely frames that area. So whenever you take a portrait picture, follow it up with a landscape picture, and vice versa, to see which one works better for the scene.
So I started out as a scrapbooker, And so, and part of the process of scrapbooking is you crop your photos to bring your subject in and to, you know, help the person looking at your pictures see what you want them to see. Yeah. So as I started scrapbooking, I realized I was cutting my pictures very, very small, and to try to get what the subject was. So that's how I got interested in photography, was to take better pictures, so I didn't have to keep cutting them so small. And from there, it just blossomed into really wanting to take those pictures that made me say ooh and ah when I looked at magazines. So, yeah.
And how did you find out about the McKays, and how did you start coming on these trips?
Okay, so I went through a Groupon, and I took several different classes through other people, and when they would all teach the same exposure triangle, but the McKays are the first people that really made it make sense, because they all talked about ISO and the time and the aperture, but no one ever explained where to start, and that for me got me excited. And so I went on, the first trip was the Marin Headlands in San Francisco, and there's a bunch of us all lined up shooting a doorway, and David told us what settings to use, and from there, just to see that picture finally come up, that was the aha moment. So that just got me more excited. So, and every trip I go on, I learn something new.
Cool. And what are some of the other trips that you've done?
The one-day trips, I've done the Marin Headlands, I did downtown Sacramento, I've done Alcatraz. I think there's one more, but I can't recall. Last year, I went on my first domestic trip. I did the animals of Montana, in Moab, Utah. It was fabulous, love animals. And then from that trip, they put together the baby animals. And so I went on that 2 months later. And then 2 months ago was my first international trip to Bavaria. And then I'm on this one, and I signed up for Africa next year. Yeah, it's like I'm hooked.
So last question, what kind of gear did you, actually I got two more questions for you.
Okay.
Let's spring one more on you. What kind of gear did you bring along on this trip?
Well, I learned from my Bavaria trip not to bring too much. So I have one camera body and two lenses. I have a telephoto and a wide angle. I recently got a Sony camera, so I brought it, but I don't know how to use it very well. It's just kind of to be on the fun excursions, sure, not the serious photography. So that and a remote trigger and a tripod, and that pretty much does me.
Nice, good.
Yeah.
And is there anything specifically on this trip that you're hoping to work on and improve?
Composition. I think I've got all the settings down, the bracketing, and for me, it's developing that eye, and for that reason, I like to follow David around, just to see how he sees, because it just feels so natural to him, and I have to work at it still.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the common questions we get on a photography trip is, what should my settings be at this location? Now, the answer really varies, but I can kind of share my thought process with you if I was to shoot this scenic view right here. Now, this is a static subject, and anytime I'm shooting a static subject, the first setting that I think about is aperture. What do I want here? Am I trying to isolate my subject, or am I trying to get everything in focus? In this case, I really want to get everything in focus. F8, F9, somewhere around there is going to be fine. I could go higher, but I really don't need to be, because I'm going to be focusing out in the distance. That's going to give me a huge range of in focus. Once I've decided on my aperture, I really just kind of check in on my shutter speed to make sure it's high enough that I'm not going to have any blur from handshake. And then I set my ISO as low as it can be, matching that shutter speed. Christina looks so little. I can pinch her. Tink, 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 tink. She's finishing up one of the last rolls of her film. You ready?
You're not gonna put this on the vlog, are you?
Vroom, vroom.